listening to Dan's Cadre of Experts. We have Wes Virdell on again. We had Wes on earlier, but there's been some changes, and we thought we need to get you back on. Welcome back, Wes.
Thanks. Glad to be back. I like coming over here.
All right. Remind us who you are, what you do.
Yeah, I'm Wes Virdell. I'm the state director for Gun Owners of America, and my main job is going to the Capitol and fighting for our gun bills. I don't want to say lobby, but it is what it is. But at least I'm doing it for the right reasons, and we get to do this in a different aspect, which is instead of us going to get on our knees and beg legislators to carry our bills or anything like that. They all made the campaign promises when they ran for office that they're pro 2A, pro Second Amendment, and so now we get to have the luxury of we get to work with them, but if they don't keep their campaign promises, then that's our leverage that we have, which is we get to then say, hey, you told your constituents that you supported these positions, and we just expect you to hold those positions true when the votes come. So. Yeah.
Well, there's been some news from GOA and Second Amendment on a national level and a state level. Where do you want to start?
The biggest one's pistol brace ban.
Yeah, that's where I thought you'd start.
Yeah.
So that, give us the background. So the pistol brace originally was a way for disabled people to shoot an AR-15 rifle.
Yeah.
By having a brace that would hold onto their forearm.
Yep. So an AR pistol, meaning it was manufactured not as a rifle. If something was manufactured as a rifle from the beginning, you can never convert it to a pistol without, or you can never shorten the barrel under 16 inches without getting an SBR stamp or AOW stamp or something like that.
Which is a background test and a $200 fee and a year wait.
Yeah. And I researched that too, slightly chasing a rabbit here, but $200 in 1934 when this tax stamp was
a lot of money.
Yeah, it was a lot of money. And so I was curious, so I went in and I think it was Google, what is it worth today with inflation? And that would be $4,000 today if they had adjusted it for inflation.
Which would be prohibitive. So fortunately, that's not prohibitive, but the year wait and the background test.
Yeah, I'm still waiting on a suppressor right now that's in jail. So.
I'm waiting on one for a year.
Yeah.
So this brace allowed you to use an AR-15 as a pistol, and so when an AR-15 has a barrel shorter than 16 inches, it's no longer a rifle, right?
Correct. Yeah. So if it was manufactured or originally sold as a pistol with a barrel less than 16 inches, the ATF came out and approved these pistol braces to be used, and a lot of people. It might have been 10 years ago, I guess, when this first started. I can't remember exactly when, and then everybody was saying, "Oh, don't get caught shouldering it." And the ATF came out with a clarification letter stating
that was fine.
Yeah, said you can shoulder it, no problem. So then it just exploded in how many of these pistol braces were being manufactured and bought. And we estimate somewhere in the 40 million range of pistol braces have been sold over the last 10 years. And then Joe Biden's ATF decided to recategorize without any legislative input. Joe Biden's ATF came out and said that we're going to deem these, if you have a pistol brace on your AR, it's going to be considered a short-barreled rifle, and if you don't have a tax stamp on it, then you're going to be charged as a felon for possession of it. So
that's the bad news. What's the good news for GOA members?
The good news is we worked very closely with the Attorney General's office, with Ken Paxton and his lawyers, and so we co-filed a complaint about this, and so basically we're challenging the ATF's opinion on that these are SBRs, and
short barrel rifle.
Yeah, kind of behind the scenes, there's kind of going back and forth between Ken Paxton's lawyers and our lawyers on what the language looks like for that. In the end, we got it all kind of worked out and filed it, and then we ended up in May 31st of this year. They granted us a preliminary injunction
on a national level.
Yeah, and it's interesting because normally we would expect it just to be Fifth Circuit for our area, which would be Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas under the Fifth Circuit. And anyways, the way the judge wrote the preliminary injunction, he said that it applies to all members of Gun Owners of America and all employees of the state of Texas. And the reason it kind of throws people off, the reason it's the employees of the state of Texas is because Ken Paxton's office represented all state employees.
I see.
And we represented all GOA members. And something that I know you're going to ask about is why is it GOA members and not everyone?
Good question.
Yeah. And it, in my opinion, it should be everyone. Everyone should be protected from the ATF at the moment.
I've never seen something where mere membership in a club excludes you from a law.
Yeah, it threw me off when the preliminary injunction was granted, but with that PI with that preliminary injunction, it basically covers, because we represented our members. It covers all members in the United States. So if you are a current member of Gun Owners of America, and it actually says the word current in the preliminary injunction. We've talked to our lawyers about it, and they said that even applies if somebody becomes a member today.
So has that improved your?
It crashed our system.
It crashed your, oh, you got a bunch of people that wanted to join.
We have an upgraded membership system, and it still managed to crash our system. And in one day, we had tens of thousands of people applying for a membership because of that preliminary injunction. So it's great for GOA, but we represent GOA members, but we also represent the entire country in the Second Amendment, and so we want to see this applied to every citizen in the country. So.
Well, I'm a life member, so I'm covered.
Yeah, yep.
Okay, so this thing must be pretty scary. Can you show us one?
I can. I brought one. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Show. So this is just the bottom half of an AR.
Yep. This is the lower receiver here, and on the back here is the pistol brace. And the difference is for the camera is there's a hole in the center, and the way that's designed, and a strap here, and it would go over your forearm. So when you grab like this, its original intent of the pistol brace is to strap onto your forearm. So let's say you don't have the use of one arm because you're disabled or something like that, it'll actually make the AR pistol very stable. So we look at self-defense, like an AR-15 is a great vehicle, I guess you'd say, for utilization of self-defense. And so if you have to choose between a pistol and an AR pistol, I would take the AR pistol every time. So
it's a great tool.
Little backstory. So I get every now and then asked to do some like men's groups and different events or whatever for shooting. And local church asked me to set up kind of a little shooting course, a little shooting challenge for one of the churches there, to have a bunch of guys come out and camp for a couple of days. And we set up the shooting course. So I set it up. We had a dueling tree, if you know what a dueling tree is, a lot of fun. And this one guy was just smoking everybody with a pistol. And I'm a mediocre pistol guy. And even though I have to work really hard to be good at pistol. And this guy is smoking everybody. And I said, hey, let me run this gun, with at the time I had an 8-inch barrel on it. I said, let me run this against your pistol. And it was like he had never held a pistol in his life, how fast we would take him out on the dueling tree. And we had some DPS guys there, and I remember their reaction. They were like, that's insane how fast that is. Mm-hmm. The guy could not keep up with this gun at all.
But it's shooting, in this case, you're shooting 9mm, shooting a pistol round.
Yeah,
it's just more accurate.
Yeah, it's at 100 yards, point of aim, point of impact, it's hitting the target, whereas good luck with a pistol at 100 yards. So
slide that off the back end of the...
Yeah, so it just comes off. There's a little spring-loaded pin that locks into there.
All right, so what you have in your left hand is the AR lower.
Yep.
And now it's legal.
Now it's legal. The only difference is a piece of plastic. So
a piece of plastic. But if
10 years in jail.
If you have a GOA membership, you can have that piece of plastic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's insane.
How the law works.
Our government is not built of the most competent people, and we're also dealing with a group of people that just don't care about the Second Amendment and don't think we should have the rights to defend ourselves. And ultimately, I think it comes down to they want us to be unarmed and unable to defend ourselves for whatever comes in the future. So, yeah.
I'm just curious if any of our listeners would find that. Go ahead and pull it off one more time. Yeah. So now that's dangerous, and then that's safe.
Yep, that's safe.
I'd like to see that in the comments if somebody actually believes that.
Yeah.
But, all right, so good job on GOA. I commend you. I'm glad I was already a member.
Yeah, we were. I've been the GOA director for about a year now, the state director, and we had a couple of bills that we got through the legislation. But
anything noteworthy?
Yeah. That was our biggest one was our Second Amendment Financial Privacy Act. So the credit card companies had come out about a year ago and said that they're going to start tracking our firearm purchases. They were going to label them through a coding process they call merchant category codes. And so basically, if we bought any firearm accessory or firearm, they were going to code that purchase as a firearm-related purchase. And what do we know that large corporations like to do? Give all our information to the government. And we found that over and over again where they're doing that. So So we Representative Matt Schaefer reached out to us out of Tyler, good representative. He's the one that carried our constitutional carry bill in 2021, and he reached out to us, said, "Hey, I want to find a way to stop these guys from doing that. That's not right," and we appreciate his initiative for that. Our legal team wrote the bill, put it forward. NRA and our team both wrote bills for him, and in the end, our language was the main part of the bill that made it through. So and the bill went through several substitutes or variations through the process, and luckily it was our language that was used. And what it does, because this is where you get into, I don't believe that government has the right to tell you how to run your business. So at the very beginning, I came out and I was like, hey, I want to make sure that we are not stepping in and controlling what businesses can and can't do, because I really don't like that concept at all. And it's one of the reasons I'm active in government. And so anyways, the way the end bill came out was that it's not a restriction on them, but if they do it, they have to notify their consumer every time that they label something as a firearm transaction. So, which means it becomes a burden for them to use that category code. I see. Yeah. It's one of those things where it's hard because, in a way, they are violating our privacy, if they're doing that. And so we have, I think, in a way, the right to stand up against that and them giving our information away. And then also we want to make sure that we're not controlling. We want to make sure that government is not controlling businesses from how they want to run their businesses. So
is this in place now in Texas?
It is. The governor signed it, and I believe it'll become officially in law in September 1st.
Is this the first one in the country, or are there other states doing this?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you.
Well, I hope it spreads, is my point, because this only covers Texas.
Yep. Yeah, and we have a lot of state directors across the country that reminds me that I need to get that information to them, and hopefully they're looking at that too. Tennessee is going to be coming up soon, their legislative session, and the big thing they're going to have there is going to be the red flag laws, and a bunch of us are going to all go to Tennessee to fight this red flag initiative that they have because of the Covenant shooting, and the most, I get we do have a mental health problem, and there's got to be some kind of solution to prevent people who are suffering from mental health issues from doing terrible things. But at the same time, we see a lot of people getting caught up in this and being prohibited from owning firearms that maybe just going through a temporary bout of depression or something like that too. And so I had a guy reach out to me, and he was stationed in New York, and this is public information. There's been articles on it, but he was stationed in New York. He was in the Army. He was getting hazed more than normal, and there's always going to be some level of that. I don't know about in today's military, but you might get hazed just for being straight now in today's military. But anyways, so this guy's in New York. He's going through some depression, checks himself voluntarily into a mental health facility. He's there 2 weeks, comes out and says, I felt like a brand new man, clear mind, finishes out his 4-year term. So he does 2 more years and then gets honorably discharged, comes back to Texas, and he goes to buy a firearm, and he gets denied on the NICS background check system. And he said he had to work really hard to figure out why he was denied on it. Once he found out, it was because New York had reported him as a mental health issue, and he's now a prohibited person. So he hired a lawyer, ended up losing the case, because he had to challenge it in New York to get that fixed. And so he's still on the NICS system. So now he's suing New York over their SAFE Act. And then GOA, which we have one of the things we're really good at is we have really good lawyers who are really good at challenging the government. And I really want to say, not just out of bias, but I really think we have the best lawyers in this industry of what we're doing. And they're going to provide an amicus brief because he already has a lawyer taking care of it, so they'll step in. And there's another, talking about the pistol brace, there was another gun organization that had also won a preliminary injunction on it. What was neat, though, was the judge, instead of citing any of their wording, they used our amicus brief as the reason for the granting the preliminary injunction. So
must be doing something right.
Yeah, I think we got some great lawyers. It's really neat for me to get to be a part of this because I feel like those guys are on a completely different level than me. So yeah.
Yep.
All
right. So what else is going on? Heard you might be running for office.
Yeah, I live in House District 53. And
Where is that?
so it's a big one. It covers from south of San Antonio, which is Medina County, and it goes on. It's the edge of I-35 on South San Antonio. It goes all the way to Fort Stockton. So it's 340 miles long, covers 16 counties. I have driven to all 16 counties in one day, one time. I was able to figure out the shortest distance to make it all happen, and it was 550 miles, and I pulled it off in one day. Made it to every county, so I thought that was cool.
And so what are our districts, or by population, or how's that work?
Yeah, so it's divided up. You have 150 members in the House, and so they'll take the total population of the state, which is in like the 30 to 33 million population right now, and then they'll just divide that up by 150, and then they'll set the districts up to make sure it's roughly 200,000 per district. And so our district has roughly 200,000. We ended up adding 4 counties in the redistricting process. I was actually not in that district until redistricting last session, and my district got brought in. So
did you lose population? What was the mechanism?
No, we didn't lose it. It's just because we had so many people coming in from out of state during COVID that our population increased in Texas. And so therefore the districts grew, I think, by about 20,000 or something like that. And so it was actually my opponent. The district was supposed to pick up Fredericksburg, Gillespie County, and whenever it did that, he was on the steering committee or the redistricting committee. This is inside baseball or whatever, but his father-in-law used to represent that district in Fredericksburg, and his father-in-law lost to Representative Biederman. And that was the Fredericksburg Tea Party that played a critical role in that, and they don't like my opponent. And so I think he was trying desperately to avoid that county from coming into his district, and he ended up picking up my county and 3 others because those 4 counties he picked up are lower in population than Fredericksburg was. So yeah,
we got the total head count up to
and
so you actually ran for this seat before?
I did. I ran once before. We did really well. Right, good. Well, whoever's watching, certain people will get on to me for that, but we did well with it, and we only spent $80,000 against his $500,000. And when you're going against an incumbent, they have a 98% reelection rate. A lot of times, people vote for a politician. One thing you're always going to find is just politicians are nice, right? Like you almost never meet a politician that's rude to somebody or something. It's part of how they get elected. And
you kiss babies, right?
Yeah, and shake babies and kiss hands or something like that. Yeah. And but the frustrating part is like, we spent that entire race trying to expose his voting record. It's like, hey, it's not about personality, it's about principle and what you stand for. And the hardest part is it takes marketing.
That takes money.
Yeah, and there's always going to be this percentage that's paying attention to the voting record and everything. So it was really easy. Those people already disliked my opponent. They knew his voting record. They knew that he doesn't come to anything for the most part unless it's a Chamber of Commerce meeting or something, kind of a feel-good thing. And I really don't want to make this race about my opponent, but it's hard not to talk about him.
Will it just be the 2 of you guys, or is there going to be a whole crowd again?
Right now, it's just 2 of us. I suspect there'll be a 3rd one coming in.
To your advantage or dis?
Probably to my advantage. Usually, so when you're dealing with incumbents, because they have such a high re-election rate, the best advantage is when you have a 3rd person come in. Well, now it takes away possibly votes that I may not have been able to get. Mm-hmm. That 3rd person would be able to pick up some of those votes.
And with 3-way, there'll be a runoff.
That's the strategy of how you beat incumbents is you get to runoffs. Generally, if it gets to a runoff, if an incumbent has to go into a runoff, that's really bad news for the incumbent, and they won't last most of the time. Sometimes they make it through, but most of the time they don't. So. And here's my thing is there's 200,000 people in our district. Like there has to be some good people in the district that want to step up and challenge.
If they each just gave a couple dollars, you'd have a lot more money than you did last time.
Yeah, and we were thinking about that. If each person donated $5, we're trying to do a $5 campaign. We hope much more than that, but if you can get enough people donating $5, like it adds up really quickly. And
you might get some radio time.
Yeah, and that's the hardest thing is buying buying radio advertisements, buying TV advertisements, buying mailers. So a mailer in a district of we have roughly 30,000 Republican primary voters in our district. Now, like this area, you might have 10,000 Republican voters in a primary. Even if you're like a Republican majority in the Houston area, you're going to have significantly less Republican voters than you do in like a district like mine. So we have roughly 30,000. That's in a non-presidential year. We might expect 40,000 because the presidential primaries also go. So a lot of people are going to show up that wouldn't normally vote except for during presidential primaries. And to do a mailer at 30,000, it's gonna cost roughly $6,000 to $10,000 per mailer, which is pretty wild to think about. So, and for guys, or for a lot of y'all that get mailers in the mail, they cost a lot of money in a congressional race.
I feel bad throwing them all away.
Yeah. Well, here's the good thing: if you keep them, and that person that wins doesn't do what he said in those mailers,
hold it to 'em.
Yeah, and that's a friend of mine does that. She keeps every one of them, and when they're not doing what they say they would do, she takes that mailer and is like, "You promised me as a voter, this is what you would do," and I think it's a great tactic, and I used them a lot during this last campaign because you can put anything you want on a mailer, and you just hope nobody's going to question it. So you could say, "I'm pro 2A, I'm pro anti-abortion, or pro life, and all that stuff." And anyways, you put all that out there, you just hope that nobody goes back and looks at your voting record or anything like that. My opponent's voting record was the opposite of that, but he was putting
this opposite of his mailers.
Yeah, and so I would take his mailers up every time I would go and talk to a group. I would take his mailers up there with me, and I would like, "Hey, let's go through what his claims are." Yeah, and just break it down. And that's the thing is, we could, because the people that show up to the meetings and everything, like most of them are very familiar with voting records and everything already. So we very easily gain the support of people coming to these meetings. But getting that information out to the rest of the constituents that are going to come vote, that was really tough to do. So it takes the money to do that. So.
Name recognition.
Yeah. Yep. Name recognition.
It's huge.
That we're lucky that we have some good family name recognition in the district, but he also does. And one of the mailers that I took up, which I love this one, his campaign team hates me for this, but he sent out a mailer talking about how pro Second Amendment he was. And the mailer was like looking through a rifle scope, but you could still kind of see the rifle a little bit. And I remember when I got the mailer, I was looking at it, and I was like, "There's something wrong with this picture. Like, maybe this is some kind of like Chinese or Russian rifle that I'm not used to." It had this little lever on the side of the rifle, the right side of the rifle. And at the time, my kid was 16. He looked at it, and I was like, "There's something wrong here." And he's like, "Well, that's a side pump BB gun, Dad." And and so I would take that up on everyone. I was like, "Hey, look, if you're going to send out that you're pro 2A, don't put a BB gun on your mailer." And
go full bore.
Yeah, my 16-year-old knew that was a TS-45 side pump BB gun, and I was like, I wish I had recognized that, but I did recognize that was not a normal rifle in that picture. So
it's going to be 2 Republicans?
Yep, 2 Republicans. We're 80% Republican in the district, and so there's a Democrat that runs. I talked to him, and the guy, I think he's probably more. He runs as a Democrat. He identifies as a Democrat, but like I've talked to him, and he'll have a gun on his hip, carrying, and he was like, "Hey, I've got to be safe." And we had this really good conversation, which was, he's like, "Hey, look, I know none of these gun control bills that they're wanting to push for are going to make a difference at all." And that's what we dealt with all session, was a ton of anti-gun bills. There were 150 anti-gun bills that were filed this session, and luckily we pretty much stopped all of those. And there were 50 pro-gun bills and 50 neutral bills that we were neutral on, and we ended up with 5 bills total getting passed. So that was good. We were told going into this session with the Uvalde tragedy that had just happened right before that.
Right.
We were told, "Hey, don't expect anything pro-gun to get through. You're going to be lucky if you hold the line." And in the end, we got 5 bills through. We ended up with, I was a little worried at the beginning of session. Dade Phelan, who is from the Beaumont area, Speaker of the House, he's in charge of appointing who chairs the committees. And he appointed a Republican named Ryan Guillen, who was a Democrat the session before. And he pointed him over the committee that all of our bills were going through. And so I had some worry, and I would say that Representative Guillen did a really good job on the gun bills. I didn't watch what he did on any of the other stuff. Like my focus was 2A this session, and we were very thankful he was willing to have dialogue with us, and basically, the chair gets to choose. We were talking about the pipeline before we started, and
that's how Texas laws are made or stopped.
yeah, and anyways, he was one of those guys that was critical for us to stop a lot of those bills from going through. So we're grateful to him, and I was pleasantly surprised that a guy that was identified as a Democrat and now as a Republican was very pro-gun this session. So
Maybe we can all get along.
I think so. I think a lot of these guys that are in Democrat districts, and probably the same on some Republican districts that are real close to 50-50, a lot of times they run in the party that's going to get them elected. I think that's the reality of it.
No, I know a JP who you just described.
Yeah. we had a county judge in my county who, same thing, he was hardcore Democrat, but because it's a Republican majority, he would run, and our county chair told him, was like, you need to run as a Democrat if you're a Democrat. And he said, but I can't get elected like that. And anyways, he passed on, and we have a really good county judge right now. But yeah, so this session was pretty interesting. One of MERS folks asked me the other day, they said, well, did you learn anything this year? Because before this session started, he was like, you got a lot to learn. Like, you don't understand how it works. And so then he asked me the other day, he's like, did you learn a lot? And I was like, no, it's pretty much exactly what I thought it would be. It's a bunch of high school drama and cliques and who holds the power and people sucking up to other people. And I was like,
you
okay.
want to be one of these people.
I don't want to be one of these people at all.
But you want to be elected.
I want to take out people that are not representing us.
You're doing it for the money, right? Don't you make $4,000 a year or something?
Yeah, it's a ton of money.
Yeah.
I'll be on welfare pretty soon. So
what's the salary for a state representative in Texas?
It actually, so during non-session, you get $700 a month, I think is what it is. You get a check of $700.
Is that minimum wage?
Yeah, probably worse than that. And then during session, you're getting about $200 a day or $225 a day, and I think it includes Saturdays and Sundays, is what I recently saw. So that comes out to $6,000 a month for 5 months, and then if there's special sessions. So this is something the Republicans, Governor Abbott called a special session to deal with property tax issues.
Right.
And yep. So the House showed up for one day and then left, but they got paid for a full month. For only showing up for one day and then not working with the Senate on it. Now, Governor Abbott had to call a second session, and this time they made some progress. I think it's a bunch of Band-Aids. I don't think that it's anything long-term, and in the end, we probably have a bigger problem with spending than we do with anything else, and they're wanting us to be their money bank for that. So, yeah. And they increased their budget, $15 million. They're going to spend, or $15 billion. They're going to spend $15 billion more in this next 2-year period than previous. So, which is, we had a $70 billion surplus coming into this session, and the solution was to increase how much they're spending money instead of maybe lowering their taxes. So, yeah, kind of frustrating. But there's a lot of, there's some good things I can say. There's some bad things I can say about this session. But in the end, there's a lot of human nature that goes on in government. And a lot of people are wanting to make their circumstances better. They either like the power or they like the influence or something like that. And then there's people that are there to actually make a difference for the voters and the constituents. And for me, we are asking, why do I want to do this? I promise you, I don't find any joy in doing this. Like, we have a family business back home that I'd much rather be a part of, and I'm watching my dad grow older, and I'm not there to help him right now, which is hard. But I don't like when government intervenes itself into business and tells them how they can run their businesses or anything else. We had Texas Workforce, which they wanted to do an audit recently on my parents' business, and just kind of seeing that, it's like they get to come in and demand all this stuff of you. And in my opinion, it's none of their business. We should have the right to pay our employees how we want. That's an agreement between the employee and the business owner. It's none of their business, what money we brought in or anything like that, or how the owners paid themselves or anything. But yet they can come in and dictate a lot of stuff. And then they just did it to another friend of mine too the other day. Just, it already takes enough time just trying to run your business, and then to have government come in and basically create more work for you that's not even their business in the first place. So, and that gets into, as a legislator, I can have some influence on 1099 pay versus regular employee pay and that kind of stuff. And then that gets into the federal government, which is they're basically forcing business owners to be tax collectors against their will, because they're too afraid. They know if that they had to go directly to the citizen and collect a tax, that this whole thing would backfire and crumble on them. There would be enough people mad and revolt against it. But if they take the money out before it ever gets
before
into
it gets on your check, nobody sees it.
And so I've got a real problem with that. And I talked about Thomas Sowell before, and
Yes.
anyways, that goes back into what's the proper role of government getting into our lives. And so I think ultimately it comes down to it's that they're to make sure that our individual rights are protected, our right to own property, our right to live our lives as we want, and then comes down to infrastructure and security. And so basically that goes into border security and into roadways and water lines and that kind of stuff. And that gets into, I'm sorry, I'm jumping all over the place now, but
No, I agree
once
with
I
you.
get wound up, yeah.
That's what they're here for, and the
Yeah.
defense.
And I think they're operating completely outside of that right now. But, shared resources, that's something like we all have our individual property, but we also have shared resources, community property, which would be our water sources and those kind of things. And anyways, I think in some situations you see some people taking way more of that resource than other people are getting access to, or they're taking it before other people get access to it. And so we had some problems with this is something my opponent was involved in, but anyways, our river downstream, and coming through our county and a couple other counties, was going bone dry. But upstream there was plenty of water, but it was magically disappearing before it got to ours.
Somebody was pumping.
Yeah, and like we have a heavy truck repair shop, and so we do some irrigation pumps and all that too. And I remember going out to one ranch, and they have this 3-inch water line going from the irrigation pump straight into the river, and just sucking it out, watering on their pivots and everything. And I was like, man, I bet you can run a lot of cattle on this. He's like, oh, I can run 5 times as much cattle on this as I could on my other property.
And so what's the law say?
So you can't, my understanding is you're not able to suck it directly out of the water or directly out of a river source. It has to be from a well that's drilled. And then there's a big debate right now on, do those wells need to be metered, and private or water rights that have existed for a family for hundreds of years. And so
Right now they're not metered in most cases, right?
no, and I want, it's a shared resource, so I think that there should be, it's tough because you get into that. This is where we get into, it's easy to talk about Second Amendment and those kind of things, but when you get into these kind of things, then it's like really looking for what's the proper role of government and the solution in it, and how much control do you have over it versus letting people have free reign over how much water they pull out. One of the issues we recently dealt with in my county is the city of San Angelo had this 20 years ago bought this property. It was a 30,000 acre ranch. They came in and bought it. Their full intent was to suck all the water and pump it over to their county, to San Angelo. And our county fought it for 20 years. We finally lost the lawsuit, and now they get to make up for this last 20 years of water that they didn't get, plus their normal amount that they would be pulling. And now we see wells that are in that area starting to go dry because they're sucking the aquifer down. So yeah, it's pretty frustrating. And now that land, because it's not really usable for a lot of other things, windmill companies are wanting to come in and put windmills on there. And so we've got landowners not wanting the windmills out there. So there's a big debate there. And that gets into our government, if I remember correctly, had supplied our state government had supplied $19 billion in subsidies to these windmill and solar companies to do this. And if I don't believe in subsidies, I don't believe in.
I believe in a level playing field.
All they're doing is they're taking your tax dollars and giving them to another company.
Picking winners and losers.
Yeah. Milton Friedman says it best. He says subsidies when you take money from profitable companies and give them to unprofitable companies.
I like that.
Yeah. And so one of my goals is I want to fight this. And, by me taking this stand publicly, that means all of those companies that receive the subsidies, they're going to start donating money to my opponent because they don't want to see somebody like me there, which they already know that if I come from kind of the grassroots right-wing side of the Republican Party, that they're not going to like me anyways. And so that's what we're up against. My opponent spent $500,000 last time. I mean, it's insane to think how much money is going into these races. We expect him to probably spend $1 million this time.
Wow.
Yeah. So It doesn't matter what we spend; they're always going to spend 5 times as much. But there is a saturation point where they can oversaturate their market, and so if we can just raise enough to reach every voter and inform them of what's going on in the district.
So can someone outside of your district donate?
Yeah, absolutely.
You have a website yet?
I do. Virdell for Texas, VIRDELLFOR Texas.com. And just, there's a real simple contribute button. Takes you to, got a real nice picture of my family on it.
Gotcha.
And then even $5 will help us. You know, one of our biggest goals is we want to show lots of donations. Like, we need a lot of money, but we want to see that lots of people support the race. That makes us stronger when other people are looking at the race too. And a lot of big donors are looking at how much support does this person have already. Like, if they don't see a lot of support,
is there any point to this?
Yeah, they're not gonna. Ultimately, are you just going to set your money on fire kind of thing? So if you're a donor, you want to make sure that the person you're supporting is actually going to have a chance at winning. And so it's kind of like the chicken and the egg too. Yep. You know, you need money to win, but if you don't raise any money, people don't want to donate. So it's it's frustrating, but
so people from out of town, out of state even can donate.
Out of state even, and
there's a dollar limit, right?
No dollar limit in Texas, which is pretty
really?
Amazing. Yeah, so
you probably haven't hit it on any.
No, yeah, the like on federal races, I think right now it's $2,800 per donor, or a married couple could do $5,600.
Not in Texas.
Not in Texas, no. So it's unlimited, and there's some debates on that because money ultimately controls what happens in government. But and it's sad that that's where we're at. Like, money controls the flow of how government works, and so you got a lot of big donors. So Ken Paxton's impeachment process.
Yeah, we need to talk about that. I'm just seeing what I read in the paper. I need the backstory.
That's one of the problems too, is we're seeing a lot of misinformation. So my opponent, who was the chair of the General Investigations Committee, has written these kind of pre-written letters to all the papers across Texas right now. And so when you read those articles that he's writing, you're like, man, Ken Paxton's really bad. Like this guy needs to go. And anyways, but then once you start doing the research, and it's just every day I keep finding more stuff. I'm like, wow, this really is a witch hunt. Like, this is a Donald Trump witch hunt is what I would equate it to. They 2 years ago, they were looking into a process like this against Ken Paxton, and the independent lawyers that they hired, the outside lawyers to do their investigation, came back and said, we don't find any evidence of any wrongdoing.
You said they hired him.
Yeah, so that would be the General Investigation Committee, and so my opponent's the one that chaired this committee this time.
So he got no-billed by the lawyers, so to speak. Right?
Yeah, basically, yeah. And so they're saying, hey, there's nothing here. One of the things they're going after is a lot of this stuff is hearsay. The General Investigations Committee, by penal code, by code, is required that you have to have sworn testimony from actual witnesses or whatnot, and they didn't have any of that. No, there's no sworn testimony. There's a representative that's been there 40 years named Representative John Smithy, and he's generally associated more along the establishment side of the party. And he came out on a floor speech, gave about a 15-minute floor speech, just kind of dissecting this entire process and saying, hey, look, none of this is in accordance with our law. This is a witch hunt. You know, you have no actual sworn testimony. And then you got the lawyers that are involved that the General Investigation Committee has hired. And those lawyers are, Harris County DA associated. And then along with that, one of the lawyers / head parliamentarian, we got our butts kicked by the Democrats, to be honest with you, on the floor. If you go and watch it, the Democrats killed a ton of our bills on points of order, and the Republicans didn't know how to handle it. And the head parliamentarian that the Speaker of the House had hired is an Obama lawyer who has donated to Democrat candidates for years. And here he is controlling the rules of the House floor, and the Democrats are whipping us, and Republicans are failing to be smart enough to counter those points of order or anything like that. I hope so. I know that the conservative guys know what's going on, and a lot of times when we talk about, that there are people that will run in either party just depending on what the majority is in their district, we think that there's some issues there that we're seeing where people probably that are calling themselves Republicans are actually Democrats. Just they knew they could get elected as a Republican in the district. So So I think that's our bigger issue is, and this goes back to the pipeline. Excuse me. So a few people in the House control all the bills that get heard and get voted on.
So if it doesn't come out of committee, it never gets voted on, never sees the light of day.
Correct. And so...
And that happens to what, 9 out of 10 bills?
Yeah.
Or more?
More. I would say probably 99 out of 100 bills. Very few bills make it through that aren't supported by House leadership. And the constitutional carry is a great example of a bill that was the exception to that. We were told for years that bill would never get through. Sorry. So anyways, we were told that bill would never get through. And there was enough activism. That's where we really... Government is run by the people who show up. That's the simplicity of it. And we look at this, and constitutional carry, it was people showed up, and they couldn't hide behind it, so they had to pass it, even though they would have preferred not to pass it.
Interesting.
Yep. Sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit.
Making you talk.
Yeah.
All right, so if you get your organization set up, I'm intrigued. My dad was very active in politics back in the 60s, and it used to be fascinating for me to watch how the machine worked. How complex is it to run for
in
representative?
In some ways it's really easy. In other ways, there's a lot of complicated to it. So one is to me, it's really easy. You show up to every meeting that you can find. And so I've ran twice for office now, and we did it without any fancy teams or anything like that, and any money for the most part. And we did really well. When I ran for Congress, we spent $27,000, and we got third place in a 10-candidate race. And we beat guys that had a lot of name recognition and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. And with $27,000, me and my wife did a fantastic job.
Is that your campaign manager?
Yeah. And this time we have a really good consulting team that's responsible for a lot of really well-known politicians that have won races. And the key now is fundraising. So I'll do the same thing before, which is go to every meeting I can, talk to everybody I can, knock on as many doors as I can. But now we have a team that can specialize in marketing to get that message further out there. So
interesting. All right, and so you're going to continue to work with GOA.
Yep. So now that session's over, we've got a couple things that we're doing. One is we're reanalyzing who voted for what. Sorry for my voice getting scratchy. We had 2 Republicans that worked against us on 2 major bills, and those are going to be probably our 2 main focus primaries that we're going to look at. It was
You have any names?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm not afraid to say them either. Sometimes organizations don't want to call people out, but because they're worried that next session, if that person's back there again, that they're going to not help them out or whatever. But if you campaign as pro-gun, we're going to hold you to it. That's our job. And Representative Harless, not far from here, out of Spring, Texas area, he was one of them, and Representative Holland out of Rockwell County up by Dallas area. Yep. So both those guys, which have in some ways have been pro-gun before, even if it was not as strong pro-gun as we'd like to see, they were still pro-gun supporters. And this time there was a bill to prohibit red flag laws from being implemented in Texas. And bill was doing great, moving along, ton of support, thought it would make it all the way through. And these 2 guys intentionally in committee decided to step out from the vote to basically to not vote. And it gave the Democrats enough of a vote to hold the majority and kill that bill. So that bill just died like that. We did ask the chair, Representative Guillen, to rehear the bill again to have another vote on it. Anyways, that didn't happen. But then the other one was, you remember not too long ago, Allen, Texas, there was a shooter that basically at this outdoor mall, retail outlet, whatever they call it. It's basically considered a gun-free zone. And anyways, this guy pulls up, gets out of his car, starts shooting everybody, and 8 people ended up dying that day. And this was in like March or April, I think, when this happened. And so that happened on a Saturday. I was at Texas Motor Speedway at Ducks Unlimited that weekend, so like 20 or 30 miles from where the shooting happened. And then the next day, a guy took a car and ran over a bunch of immigrants that were they're possibly illegal, I'm not sure, but anyways, ran over them and killed 8 of those people. So 8 people died from an AR-15, 8 people died from a car. And then that Monday, the next day was a Monday, I'm leaving Brady, my hometown, to go to the Capitol to work with some bills. And I get there, and I rode my motorcycle that day, so my phone's in my pocket. I can feel it vibrating. I don't think it's anything important. And when I get there, I pull my phone out, and it says they're taking a vote right now to raise the age to 21 to buy an AR-15, and or all semi-automatics with detachable magazine. And I rushed into the Capitol as quick as I can. They had taken the vote like 5 minutes before I got there, and those 2 guys voted for it. They had voted for it to get it out of committee. The Democrats were ecstatic. One thing you never want to do is give them a win on something like this, because it motivates them to try harder next time. And they never let a tragedy or a crisis go to waste, kind of thing. And so I went to Representative Holland's office, and pretty angry, and like I seemed very laid back. I was
I've never seen anything else from you.
I was there's a different side of me, and I was very upset that a guy who had campaigned as pro 2A would do that to us. And I went into his office. He wasn't there, and his staff was, and I said, "Hey, do y'all want to give a statement on why your rep just took that vote?" And they were like, "What vote?" Like, they playing dumb on it, and they knew exactly what I was talking about. And I said about the vote to raise the age to 21. And like, "Oh, we're not going to give a comment on that." And I said, "Well, you tell your representative that he violated his oath to the Constitution. He violated his commitment to the Republican Party, and we're going to hammer him in his district for this." And they were just like, "Okay, you're free to do what you want." They had kind of an arrogant attitude about it. We'll say fraternity style, maybe. A lot of these staffers, there's some great staffers in the Capitol, but some of these, they hire a lot of young staffers, and it doesn't mean they're incompetent or anything like that. It's just sometimes you get certain personalities from that. And anyways, I leave there. I go on my way to Harless's office to tell him the same thing, and I pass a group of Moms Demand Action. The Moms Demand Action is funded mostly by George Soros, and they're a subgroup of Everytown USA, which is a very liberal group. And one of the things the Democrats did really well was show up to the Capitol, and one of the things Republicans did really bad this session was not show up to the Capitol. For every one Republican that showed up, I would guess that there were 10 Democrats that showed up. And a lot of times the legislators are listening to who shows up, and who's going to cost me an election and who's not going to cost me an election. So a lot of times they're metering, if I take this vote, how much is it going to affect me in my district? Is it going to cost me my next race? And some don't care. They just do what they want anyways. But anyways, they popped off to me in the hallway. There was a gaggle of about 20 of them. And they
know who you are.
Yeah, I have my GOA shirt on. They know who I am, and we see each other all the time in committees, and I have to listen to them give the most ridiculous arguments why we should have our gun rights taken away from us. And one of them pops off in that group and says, "Hey," like she did, we're raising our age to 21. And anyways, I was like, I just said, remember, I'm worked up, and I was like, "You guys are idiots." That's just what I said, clear as day to them. More of my military voice, but not aggressive or anything. And anyways, like, they all, like a bunch of chickens, like, what? And I said, "How old was the shooter on Saturday in Allen, Texas?" And they wouldn't answer the question because they know the answer. And they wouldn't answer it. And I said, "Just tell me how old the shooter was." And they wouldn't answer. I said, "The shooter was 33 years old. Your bill wouldn't do anything to stop something like this." And they started to say something. I just turned around and walked off, ignored them. And I saw them later whenever they met up with their bigger gaggle. There was about 100 of them total. I could hear them down the hallway when they met up, and they're like, "And he said we were idiots." And that gave me a little bit of a laugh. But I went to Harless's office, told them the same thing. And then the next day, a staffer came into, I was in a different representative's office sitting there talking to the rep and the staff, and another staffer from a different office came in, saw the GOA shirt, and said, "Hey, I bet y'all are pretty mad at Holland and Harless right now." I said, "Yeah, we're real mad at them." And he said, "Well, my friend works in Holland's office, and he said he was intimidated by you." And I said, "Well, you tell your friend to man up, and that he's never had to deal with a real threat if he thought that I was a real threat to him that day." So, yeah. But, I mean, that's something that, it's not like something we're proud to go do, but, like, we want to make sure we hold these people accountable for what they do. So, and I don't remember why I started that story, but that's the end of the story on that. Yeah.
What else is going on in the Capitol I need to be aware of? Because, like I said, I read everything in the paper, and I'm suspicious because it's confusing.
I would be suspicious of everything. And I was talking about the PACs and stuff. Like, the more we dig into it, like, I don't know, maybe he, let's say he did do something guilty, right? But so far, and we're talking about Travis County here, has not found anything to charge him on. So the only way that the Attorney General Ken Paxton has been very effective as an Attorney General. He's sued the Biden administration more times than any other Attorney General in the country. He's won the majority of those, and he's been good to us on the gun stuff. On the Suppressor Freedom Bill, you know, part of the way that the Suppressor Freedom Bill was written, and my predecessor, Rachel Malone, who deserves a ton of credit for the constitutional carry, almost, I would say all the credit if you want, for all that stuff. She did really fantastic, but the bill was written for the Suppressor Freedom Bill that it required the Attorney General to challenge the federal government on it. And for those who don't know, the Suppressor Freedom Bill is what we look at as it's based on interstate versus intrastate commerce. And so the Commerce Clause currently is the idea that interstate commerce, meaning if something moves across state lines and the federal government has jurisdiction on it.
Right.
Now, I disagree with that too, and that goes back into the 30s and railroads and all kinds of stuff, but and trucking being competitive. Commerce Clause was originally written, and Madison even talked about this. It was written for the purpose of enabling free trade among the states. And the Commerce Clause has been completely abused to now regulate everything that's manufactured, and regardless to me if it goes across state lines. So we're even talking about mattresses.
But your law will allow Texans to buy suppressors.
Yep. Yeah. So if it's
without the $200.
Yeah. So if it's made in Texas, kept in Texas, use Texas materials, then therefore at that point, and it's never crossed the state lines, that's considered intrastate commerce, and it shouldn't fall underneath the Commerce Clause or federal. Yeah, and it was passed.
But it needs to be tested, right?
Right, and so somebody did come forward, ask the Attorney General to challenge it, and so it's Paxton versus, and I can't remember the other party in that, but it is challenged. It just went through the North Texas court, and Judge Pittman ruled in favor of suppressor manufacturing in Texas. And so now it's got another step. So you still can't go and manufacture a suppressor here in Texas and own it and it be legal without a tax stamp. But it is working its way through the court system. It might be another 2 years before we get our next step in that process.
That'll be a first in America.
Yeah. So Kansas had passed a suppressor freedom bill before, but it didn't have the challenge to the federal government built into it. And two guys now have felonies because of it. One of them manufactured the suppressor, the other one bought it. ATF stepped in, said, we don't care what your state law says. We're still going to do it. And I think GOA played a role in fighting for those guys.
Let's back up a second. I've got a suppressor for one of my ARs, and it is still 140 decibels.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not as quiet as people think it is.
No, it's not like the movies, is it?
No, and I'll shoot without ear pro sometimes, but like you really should still have your ear pro on with a suppressor. Like it's not at that hearing safe level. But it does help some. I did a test one time with my wife. We lived on this pretty nice ranch in Pontotoc, Texas. Anyways, I had her get about a quarter mile from me, not downrange, but off a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then I fired a couple of shots. She couldn't hear it from a quarter mile away, but up close it's still. And if you're downrange if you're the target that's being shot at, like it is just as loud as whether you had a suppressor or not. Like all that sound is still directed that direction. So yeah. There's some interesting theory on it.
It's a safety thing to me.
I think so. Yeah.
So I'm trying to avoid losing my hearing. I've done fairly well.
Yeah.
Wearing earplugs and ear protection, but that's just another layer of protection. That's why I believe in them. And yet they've turned them into another boogeyman, kind of like your pistol brace you had out earlier.
Yeah.
I find it ironic that a loud car is illegal and a quiet gun is illegal.
Yeah. So if you go to New Zealand, like they don't regulate, and maybe the laws have changed since last time I checked, but they don't regulate manufacturing, owning of suppressors, or even barrel length. Mm-hmm. Like the United States has some really goofy laws on some things, but you go to New Zealand because it's not regulated by the federal government. The suppressor cost is cheaper, and everybody uses them, and I think they all appreciate that they're not hearing gunfire all the time, because you got a lot of hunters in New Zealand that are hunting a lot of game, and it's pretty cool to watch. These guys aren't regulated on barrel length or on suppressors, and then here we've got some very stupid laws that make
arbitrary laws.
Yeah,
I agree completely.
And all these laws were based out of fear of Al Capone's gang, the gangster stuff, and all that. That's why we have our short-barreled weapon laws now that we have that we're trying to fight against. It all goes back to the National Firearms Act of 1934. If that had not been created, we probably wouldn't exist as an organization. But the goal is to abolish the ATF, abolish the National Firearms Act, and I would like to see a society where we don't have to exist anymore. So yeah.
Don't hold your breath.
I know. The reality is there will always be tyrants. Yeah.
All right. So our listeners ought to. What's the takeaways today? Join GOA. How do you do that?
Yep. Join GOA. Easiest one is go to goatexas.com and sign up there as a member, or you can go to gunowners.org. That's our national website, and sign up there. And then show up to the Capitol. Those who show up control the government. Look, you can wear all the patriotic clothing you want. You can go to all of the July 4th fireworks shows or Trump parades or whatever. But if you don't show up and talk to your legislators, it's not going to matter for you. And we will lose everything we have if people don't show up, especially if the Democrats are showing up 10-1 against us. So eventually we'll lose what we have if we don't get. It's supposed to be a government of the people. And unfortunately, the very few people are participating in it right now. Now, as if you're a GOA member, your membership goes towards paying us to be there on your behalf. A lot of people are working jobs, trying to feed their families, and I get that.
Yeah, I'm kind of busy.
Yeah, and so that's what we do, is we try to be that voice for you there. But even just picking up the phone call and calling your legislator and just saying, hey, here's where I stand on this bill. So sign up for our email alerts. With a membership, you get our email alerts, and then basically we'll send you an email out, and there'll be a button you click, and it'll tell you how to look up your legislator and his office phone number, and then you call them, or there's automated emails. Honestly, the best way to do is call. Spend 5 minutes and call your legislator.
Pick up the phone.
Yeah. The automated emails, and I've done the automated emails for a decade, right? Like I get, hey, send this email to your legislator, and I do that. I asked some of the staffers, like, hey, what do you think about, getting these emails? And like, yeah, we kind of pay attention, but the phone calls are their biggest.
Okay. Hey, I'm glad you told me that.
Yeah. So if, they can hit delete button over and over, or just click delete all, right? And no big deal. But
they have to listen to you.
Yeah. If they have to pick that phone, the first question they're going to ask is, where do you live at?
Right.
Do you live in our district?
In the district.
Yeah. And
but I don't have to be in the district to contribute to yours.
Exactly.
Give me your website one more time.
VirdellForTexas.com.
That's the other half of this equation.
Yeah, and
Virdell, FOR Texas.
Yeah. So here's one thing is, we don't like our government. I like to go back to 80% of people think our government is not working for us, and 80% of people think that their legislator is fighting for them. That's a marketing thing that just legislators are spending money telling you how great they're doing when
all those other legislators.
Yeah, it's always with all the other ones. It's never theirs because they're marketed heavily too. They're telling you all the great things that they've done, even if they didn't do them. And they're not ever telling you any of the bad things they do. That's like my job, I guess you would say, is to point those things out. But find a candidate that you like, even if it's not me. Find a candidate in your area or whatever that you like, and donate to them. Because if you want to see a change, you have to change who we send there. So, yeah.
Well, I like what you do. You look at voting records, because otherwise this is a popularity contest or a name recognition contest. But voting records.
Yeah, vote for principle and not personality. That's where we could change our whole government in 2-year period if we voted off of principle instead of personality. So,
sounds like a good plan.
Yeah.
What else do you want to hit on today?
I feel like we covered a lot, other than, we talk about legislators. One of the things I'd mentioned to you early on was effective leadership, and I see a lot.
Do we have any of that?
Some, but a lot of legislators are afraid to stand up against the leadership of the House. We're talking on the House side or on the Senate side. They're afraid to stand up to the establishment because they feel like they're going to be ineffective if they voice their opinion, right? If it disagrees with leadership. And so then they won't say anything. And really what they're doing is they're making themselves ineffective because they won't stand up for their constituents or for whatever they believe is correct. And so you have to have people stand up. The minority, believe it or not, the minority can control the narrative. They can control the situation. They can shift how the politics are going if they just stand up. And one of those examples I always like to go back to is George Mason, I'm going to mess it up, but George Mason and 2 other guys Edmund Randolph and Gary Elbridge. I think I'm saying that right, or Elbridge Gary. Anyways, those three guys were the three guys that refused to sign the Constitution because it didn't have a Bill of Rights in it. And so think about this, we almost didn't have a Bill of Rights, but
it'd be a different country.
Yeah, the three guys who were in the minority who could have felt like, oh, if I stand up against them, I won't ever get anything done, but they were willing to stand up in the minority and say, like, hey, we need to have a Bill of Rights for the national government, the federal government, because a lot of them felt, hey, the states have their own constitution, or their own Bill of Rights, we don't need to do that. And these three guys created the whole back and forth Federalist versus anti-Federalist debate of a Bill of Rights and ratifying the Constitution. And now we have a Bill of Rights that is amazing and has protected a lot of people in this country from their government. And it's because three guys were willing to stand up. So everybody should be, despite whether you think you're going to be ineffective for standing up, if you do stand up, you'll be more effective than you realize. So, yeah.
So you might not win any popularity contest if you're elected.
Maybe not in the House, and initially they're going to think, oh, my representative is ineffective or something like that. But it's not going to be like bam, okay, we're instantly going to see a change. Look at how long it took to ratify the Constitution and get the Bill of Rights in there. It didn't happen the next day on that deal. But a good example is what's his name, Boehner, Speaker Boehner. I'm not saying he was a good speaker or anything like that, but when he was a young congressman, he was in the minority. He stood up to the establishment, and he changed the way a lot of things were done in Congress at the time because he was willing to be the guy in the minority that stood up. And it led to him becoming Speaker of the House, and it shifted the way a lot of things happened. But as a speaker, he was much different than he was when he was in his younger years. And that gets to people staying in office too long also.
Oh,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah.
You were supposed to have the citizen statesmen that come and serve and then leave.
Yeah.
So I'm torn. I like what you're doing for Gun Owners of America, but
I know, me too. That's
but I know this is your passion. It's something you want to do.
I truly believe in following conviction, and if you're convicted to do something, I think you should follow it, and I don't think you're going to have regret, even if you don't achieve everything you were trying to, or even some of what you're trying to. You can go to bed at night knowing that you did what was right. So
thank goodness we got some idealistic people like you. The rest of us are just too busy. Or that's what we tell ourselves.
I have a lot of ideals. Yeah, I'm very idealistic, but our founding fathers were idealistic. Look at the massive. What's the way to word it? You look at the monumental task in front of them. They're going to take on the largest military in the world, largest government, and tell them to stick it, and they did it. A bunch of guys with pitchforks and rifles, basically stood up to this largest army, and pretty amazing what they accomplished. So yeah,
created the best country in the world.
Yeah,
lasted for.
I'm hardcore capitalism and hardcore anti-socialism. So yeah,
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Well, it's been fun.
Thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. So when you have more news, you give me a call. We'll get you back on.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Looking forward to it.